Actually, I don't know where to start. The reason being, I don't know if I have to contradict my own panelists, or I have to take off from where Vipin has left. Vipin, when he spoke, I thought it's going to be more of a philosophical talk about sound in cinema. I think I again contradict Beena, what she said. There has been not so much discussion about sound. Actually, I myself is here in NikkisCafe for the 4th time on a panel like this. Every other year I am here and talking about sound. Even before people of Kerala knew about sound in 2009, after my Oscar win. So I think that after that there's a lot of talk about sound and a lot of importance as sound people we are getting in the industry at the moment. And there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of students have come into the foray, and there's always discussion about sound in cinema. And I think all that is very, very, very positive, because when I started off in the industry talking about doing sound, I'm very happy. First of all, let me say, Hari hasn't changed a bit. He was my senior in the film school, and I used to be scared to go to him because he was so philosophical in his nature and his approach to studies and approach to cinema, and I didn't have the guts to go and talk to him. Even after 20 years, I see him the same. He has a similar approach to the work that he does, and I love the conviction and I admire it. And Bobby, in a way, Bobby and me grew up together. In the sense, Bobby was my 1-year junior in the film school, and right from drawing, short division for his continuity film to Bobby was my first sound editor. The concept of sound design, when we started off in the Indian film industry, there was nobody to edit sound, to be with us, to understand the intricacies of how to deal with sound. And Bobby was one of the foremost learner in that respect. Bobby and myself has edited the first sound effects library in the country in way back in 1997. In today unknown DAW called Cedar, and so Bobby in that sense is a veteran, and I have no shame in calling him an eminent sound person. And Neeraji, so nice to see you, and your existence were hitherto unknown to us, but I'm very happy to see a woman mixing engineer. You are not alone in this whole battle with sound. Some of the most eminent sound people in the world are women. And just to tell you an example, the CAS, the Cinema Audio Society of America's president, this year, from last year onwards, Steve Urban is a woman, and I have the good fortune to work with some of the best women sound mixers in the world. So I always admire them because they're very organized, and their ability to hear things, their ability to manage very small things, is extraordinary. And there is a contentious issue among men and women about hearing. Please don't feel it very gender biased. They say, not me, they say that women have less ability to understand the direction of sound. Not to be blamed onto them. It's a evolution problem. When we evolved as human beings, men were always hunters, so we were always prone to what is coming from behind us. So that's one of the reasons why Oro 3D was developed. Wilfred Van Balen, who is the author of Oro 3D, has told me in one of the discussions that he has spoken to a Japanese scientist who works a lot on brain power, understanding how human ear process sound. And his invention, this Japanese scientist's invention, is that we are more prone to listening sound from behind. When we always look forward, and the attack always came from behind. So by evolution, we are prone to, and we have a more sense of direction from behind than from the front, which only meant when you see something, you don't need to hear. That's what Brazon taught me, is that, if you're seeing something, then you don't need to hear it. And if you're hearing something, then you don't need to see. And to me, it's all about how we knit, images together. Like a very important point Hari has pointed out here is that, when I wrote my book, Sounding Off, I thought a lot about what should be the name of the book. In Malayalam it's called Shabda Tarapatham. So I thought I want to find a name like Walter Moore's book called The Blink of an Eye. What is a blink of an eye? The blink is a cut. In films, when we see a cut, that is equivalent to a blink. Is there anything like that in sound? I thought a lot, and I couldn't find anything. I asked a lot of film students, asked a lot of teachers. Is there anything like that in sound? Is there anything like a blink of an eye? You can think about it, and if you find an answer, I would like to hear from you later on. My thought is that there isn't a blink. There is a continuous sense of motion, which is, sound keep coming to you. What is it that, if you're constantly hearing things, then what is it that not tire us? It's that our human brain has the ability to ignore things that we don't want. For example, if you and me are walking down the street, we hear a hell lot of sound. There is traffic, there is noise in the street, there are people talking. But if you and me are still talking to each other, we hear each other. But if I keep a microphone there, the microphone doesn't have the intelligence to hear how the human brain is able to process sound. Now, to me, if I am given a situation in life to be part of a filmmaking process, my first and foremost duty is to understand the main author's vision about what is the story that he wants to say. And with my knowledge of technology and with my understanding of art, how well I can further that vision is my top priority. And I think that is why I am hired as a professional in the first place, to be part of a filmmaking process, to be part of a storytelling initiative. So Hari has said here that there's department, everything is compartmentalized. Why should we feel bad about being compartmentalized? Filmmaking is a compartmentalizing process. So you have an idea, you have a scene, you have then those continuous motion of emotion. We break it down into simple shots. We deconstruct everything. When we deal with a story in a film, we are probably dealing with somebody's a lifetime experience, an experience of a lifetime. If it is what would be the nature of the movie, and we deconstruct it. We deconstruct it into the smallest element. What do I look when I deconstruct the larger picture into the smallest element? My job is to find the part in the whole and the whole in the part. If I am not able to identify one thing in that one deconstructed small 30-second, 10-second, 5-second element of the larger picture, I think I am in the wrong business. So there's nothing wrong in being broken down into pieces. I think we should have the ability to develop, to find that one thing within the broken pieces. because this broken pieces of information is going to put together a vision which we are all supposed to further it. And have we ever thought, when we talk about technicians being the biggest pillars and the technicians being subjugated, or technicians not being given importance, or the people who you are working with doesn't have as much intelligence as you are, or they don't have the ability to understand the aesthetics as we understood it, and how you have studied and you are standing. I mean, have you ever thought about an actor or an actress? The moment we say action, when the camera is on, they are actually unbiased, their soul in front of the camera. For that moment of action to cut, they are taking another individuality, they are taking another persona. They are actually being naked in front of a whole wealth of people, to actually gauge them, to judge them, to understand them, sometime be with them. I think so much of their life is getting invested in a piece of celluloid. And we, be it a cameraman, be it a soundman, be it a writer, be it a director, be it anybody, be it a lightman, be it a foxtrot, be it a bowman, all of us put together is assisting that person to bear his soul, to identify another individuality, to identify one's own self, so that when people watches him or her, or when people watches a creation, when I'm talking about actors right now, because we were talking about mainstream cinema, and cinema per se, without faces, if there's nothing for an audience to lock their eyes with, you and me wouldn't be sitting here today and talking about cinema. And when those set of people bears themselves and taken up another identity, and if that identity, what they have imbibed, if that identity is going to move you in a dark room, if they are going to change you in a dark room, if they're going to refine you in a dark room, if they're going to make you a better person when you come out of the dark room, I think that is a lot more work, a lot more investment as an individual in the stream of work that you do. I am only assisting them. I'm only a very minuscule part of that process, and I shouldn't look at myself as somebody who is, who is above the ground, or somebody who is, who actually looks at everything from a bird's point of view. It's not that. I'm just part of the whole process of being with everyone, and I think that's what for me filmmaking process is all about. And I'm very, very happy to be part of such a process that every day when I sit with people, when I see my work and my compatriots' work being admired, enjoyed, people being moved by work people do, I feel happy to be part of such a movement. And I feel every day of my life being invested in celluloid is worth it. Now, coming back to aesthetics of sound in cinema, what is wrong in talking about aesthetics? It's very subjective. Yes, it is subjective. How can I talk about my subjective association with cinema? You have your own subjective viewpoints that you can implement in the work that you do. But I'm talking about, like-minded people, about an overall aesthetics, that we can discuss. When we discuss an overall aesthetics, we are discussing a history of cinema, we are discussing history of art, we are discussing a history of the related work of art. We could discuss that, and I don't think there's nothing wrong in being talked about it. I see actors are being more judged than a sound person or a camera person or a writer. If my fellow mates are opening themselves to be judged so badly and so harshly, and I think there's nothing wrong in me being judged and me being talked about what is my subjective and personal view. And every film is somebody has written, someone has put it out for interpretation. So everything that I do is just a part of that interpretation. So I look at it from that holistic point of view. And Bobby talked about the technicalities of so when sound comes to you, what happens. I am actually not looking at it from that very technical aspect of sound. So what is, I am actually supposed to talk about sound design. What is sound for you? Is that something that you hear? Is that something that you experience? Is there a difference between hearing and listening? When you watch a movie, are you hearing it or are you listening it? What am I supposed to do as a sound person with a wealth of sound available to me in a movie making? I think I am, from the perspective of sound design, what I am making an audience do is to make you go through a subjective listening process. And that subjective listening is about my idea of what I want my audience to hear. Vipin very eloquently said something about sound here in his introduction. He said, he was actually quoting Kumar Saab. Sound is something that you take you inside, and a picture is something that you look outward. Actually, as the technology evolved, if I historically speak about sound, every invention that happened in cinema, it was for sound. Every standardization that has happened in filmmaking is because of sound. Just the fact that cinema runs at 24 FPS is because of sound. It used to be in 16 frames per second, and people used to shoot it, and production people, they used to run it fast, and so the picture length is shorter, so they could add one more show. So when they shoot it, they used to crank it. Like the way look at how history repeats. Today, one of the main problems that we deal with in cinema exhibition is that what we mix, they play low, so we mix loud. So they play it even low, so we mix it even louder. So there's a war between the projectionist and a mixing engineer or a sound mixer. This war keeps on going. And after having read the history of sound, I felt I'm not alone in this war. There was a history of me that I used to go and bribe the projectionist so that he plays the sound in the exact Dolby 7 level, because I used to, in my beginning part of my career, I used to go to London and mix movies and mix it in this most perfect academic conditions and come back to play with Hindi movies screamingly loud, and they never used to play that, and I literally have to go and play bribe to people. And I've heard many stories which projectionists have written. I had to go through that ordeal of listening to stories that they have written. They eventually want to be a filmmaker. And I said, if you want to be a filmmaker, you first play the sound in level 7. So for you, we will play it in 7. I have gone through that situation. What I'm saying is, this war between projection and the filmmaking community is a part of history. So when they used to crank up the speed of the movie, the cameraman and the director, they come together and they used to crank up the speed of the shoot, so that when they actually crank it up, it'll play all right. So, and when sound came into being, we needed a constant frame rate, so that sound can be recorded and played back in sync. So the standardization of 24 FPS came because of sound. Standardization of monochromatic stock in filmmaking came because of sound, because before that they were shooting in panchromatic stock, and they were using very high ampere lightings. Those were a problem for sound, and they created noises, and we drove them away of the studios, and eventually very high speed stock has come in. So if we look at it, and later on The dice have come in, and every invention that has happened in the filmmaking process is because of sound. So for you, all of you sound guys who want to be sound guys and who want to be part of sound community, don't feel bad. Everything has happened because of us. So we first of all, we've got to be very proud, because we are one of the little more aware people in the whole unit of filmmaking community. So we got to be proud. I'll tell you why. Like Vipin said, what happens to a picture? When we look at a picture, it is a two-dimensional exposition of an image, where if you keep a camera, it is that look, that one look. Yes, it is a two-dimensional exposition, and that's an image which is abstract in nature. If you look at a painting of Picasso or anyone, we look at a painting and we see that is abstract, which means, like Hari said, subjectively we can associate any meaning to that picture. If we take one shot of a movie and if we look at it as a moving image, still that moving image is expositions from in the horizontal plane. I'm not coming to the three-dimensional picture, I'm talking about the traditional two-dimensional picture. And we look at it and we see it is abstract in nature. The moment I start putting sound to that picture, I start concretizing the meaning of that abstract image. Now you need to understand this, that you are someone who is going to concretize the meaning of an abstract image. You start putting the ambient sound, so you are defining it's a day or a night. If you are going to put in a rain sound, you are defining a season. So imagine you have the ability to define the meaning of an image which the author, be it the director or the writer or the people who have constituted that image, probably haven't thought of. So the final meaning of the image that comes to an audience is actually a product of the image, the exposition of the two-dimensional image that you saw and the sound that you have put together. This is called a synthesis, if you understand the meaning of a synthesis theory. And so in filmmaking, every piece of film that we watch in the cinema is a part of this synthesis. A meaning a set of people have defined. And when that meaning comes to you, you have your own association with what you saw. You as an individual, you as an artist, you as a person who is a social being, you also imbibe your own meaning. I think your first association as an audience sitting in a hall is the breath that you take. The breath that you take has a cycle. And I feel, as a sound designer, that breath that you take, forming an internal rhythm of a human being sitting in the dark room, has a direct connection with what you see in the screen before you. And it's creating a cycle. As a sound man, I have the power to be able to place each and every audience in the room, to place himself or herself in a cycle of his own breath and his own rhythm. And once I get him onto that plane, I can change things. I can do anything with him. I can make him cry. I can make tears welled up in his eyes, but not to fall. I can make it fall at a later stage. I am able to manifest the meaning and association of everything I am making them watch. I have the ability to manifest. And I do this on a subconscious level. Now, why is it subconscious? When we talk about design, I am talking about sound design. When I am talking about design, or any design for that matter, a design is something that you can touch. It is tactile. You can touch, you can feel, you can smell. Some cases. Suppose take the work of an architect. You can see what he has constructed. Take the case of a sculptor. Whatever he has sculpted out of anything, a piece of rock, and he sculpted an idol out of it, or anything, or a painter whose work we can touch, feel. But a sound man's design is something that you can't touch it. It is not tactile, So where are we doing all these designs? We are doing this design in a plane where you can't reach, you can't touch, you can only feel. Because I feel cinema is a continuum of time and space. Every time camera moves, or every time the camera chooses to take other angles and makes me see things, I am associating sound with it in an area where the picture doesn't deal with. If a picture is dealing with two-dimensional space, as a sound man, I am dealing with the time, the temporal element of that space. So every time I am putting sound to a picture, I am actually putting temporal informations so that an audience experience a time element. Suppose, imagine we are in a city where we hear so many things, so much of things, and traffic, people, short burst of sound, and it is filled with things. Imagine a situation in cinema where everything is filled up, everything is filled up, and you hear such loud sounds, and you can't think of anything. And imagine one by one that everything that was filled up goes away, and I see a landscape. When I am not hearing anything, to me it's a landscape available to me. So I am building like an architect in a landscape that I can't see or I can't touch, but I am building things to it, by way of putting sound. It could be ambiances, it could be Foley sounds, it could be sound that is recorded on location, it could be a composer's interpretation of a scene or an emotion, be it anything. I am filling up these spaces with all these different elements. Then when I have all these different elements, I am looking at it from a point of view of an artist and see, at this point of time, I would like him to hear this. At this point of time, I would like the audience to experience this, or that, or this. Whether something is far away from him, or something is closer to him. Whether he experiences, is he listening to sounds or is he listening to emotion? Just to tell you an example, if in the middle of the night, if I hear a car sound, break of a car sound, it immediately gives me a sense that an accident has happened, or something ominous has happened. Every time I am putting sound to an image, I am trying to create an image track. I am trying to create emotional impulses that I deal with it, the variations of those impulses that I build in a space, and I see to it that this impulses is being manifested in a way that goes hand in hand with the narrative graph of a movie. When I say narrative graph, traditionally of a narrative film, or if whatever be the impression the author wants the audience to experience, I go hand in hand with it. For me, sound design is something, and I feel there's very little difference between sound design and sound mixing. It's a very thin line. Am I technically dealing with sound, or is it something that I want the audience to hear, a particular way? So if a film is all about ways of seeing, to me, design. I'm not talking in the very very technicalities of it. I'm talking about from a very very artistic point of view, and so what I said is that you are in a film community. You are somebody who is very very powerful, because what is the meaning that is probably not intended by the author, you are able to generate, and you have that power. We, the sound people, have the power to reinterpret the image in our own way, in our own very very way. And to me, that is the most beautiful aspect of being a sound man. And I don't feel lessened by any other people in the sound community. I think I am far more powerful, and I understand my power, and I use it diligently. And that's what being in a film dome is for me all about. And Bobby talked about two kinds of sound. Of course those two kinds of sound we always deal with. All of it is for the furtherance of a vision that we are working, in hand for a coherent, understanding of that vision. And he talked about recreated sounds, and dubbing is something that is very very recreated. And he said that it has no body language, it has no meaning. From a very clinical way, if you look at it, yes, what he said is very right. And to me, even though I am the biggest proponent of sync sound, for me, sync sound is not everything. If you look at the history of Indian cinema, there's a long history of, and there's a long tradition of dubbing films. If you look at Mughal-e-Azam, for example, you listen to how Dilip Kumar has voiced his character. Probably he did something else in while shooting, and he did something else by way of dubbing that film. Or if you take any other actors, be it Mr. Bachchan, be it Rajkumar, be it Devanand, be it anybody who has gone through the old golden era of filmmaking and then passed on this dubbing era, they all have reinterpreted their exposition in the picture format to a completely different art, in voicing. I think voicing is a hugely developed art for me in Indian cinema, and this is very very peculiar of Indian cinema and Italian cinema. If you look at some of the celebrated work of Fellini, I feel this has been very 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 well done. While shooting Marcello Mastroianni has already spoken 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6, and he came back to the ADR room and he has given one of those soulful emotions which we saw in some of the celebrated work of Fellini. So there is nothing to be ashamed of the fact that we dub movies. We dub movies. We have a great tradition of dubbing, and some of the huge stars in Indian cinema is because of their voicing, because of the way they are able to modulate and put a new being into the celluloid for the audience to enjoy. And sometimes they get caught up with their own image. Sometimes some people have broken it to a great extent. I have the good fortune to work with some of the biggest actors. My first movie I worked with Nasir Saab. What Nasir Saab does, Nasir Saab just keep looking at it and looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. We have to keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. He keeps looking at one scene, looking at it 5 times, 6 times, 10 times, and then he says, okay, let's roll. And he would just sit there and emote. I thought that was fucking amazing, man. There is no other actor in the world is able to do that. And I have worked with some of the biggest actors in Hollywood, and I found it so clinical because they have to see. There has to be a visual cue. There will be a line running. There will be like beat 1, beat 2, and third beat they speak. And without those cue tracks, they can't speak. It's so clinical. It is so much doing a job, and that's why they distest it. And we don't have to follow what the Hollywood says, what it is the standard. There's no standard. we come from oral tradition. We come from a tradition. I mean, we are the only, we are the only civilization in the world that said sound is knowledge, sound is memory. We come from that, you know. Hari mentioned Nada Brahma, you know. Which country has the awareness about Nada Brahma as any other tradition in the world? So, and we come from, Indian cinema has originated from theatre, and in theatre it is, you go and you speak, and there is a music to speak, you know. And when an actor, I mean, to me as a sing sound recordist, as a live sound guy, my only aim is to understand, like Krishna Misa said, every piece of recording is not is not an art, but everything that we do becomes a work of art, because I think it's because of this. When an actor speaks in a space, when an actor belt out his spoken dialogues written for him as a part of an event, he makes us, he speaks those dialogues in an acoustic environment, within a given ambience, with people around him as characters. One, he is taking the shape of another human being or another personality. And two, he is interacting, he is trying to interact with the acoustic environment around him. And if I don't understand what that acoustic environment around him, and to record that, I am not an artist, you know. Remember, the spoken dialogues of an actor turn into speeches. The moment it leaves his mouth, it becomes a speech which has emotion, which he has thrown out into the space. That is what I am capturing. I am capturing the images that made a spoken dialogue a speech. As a mixing engineer, my aim is to find an element of speech in the recorded dialogues which an actor spoke alone in a dark room. As a sound designer, my aim in my entire life, my aim is to find those impulses of emotion and capture it and imprint it in the celluloid, so that a wealth of audience finds those impulses of emotion and reacts to it. I think that's my duty, and that's me as an artist. That's how I see myself in the whole aesthetics of filmmaking. Thank you. I differ with you on both the points. One,
then the standardization of FPS, frame per second, started with the emergence of sound, because of the sound, you said. That calls for a certain clarification. And then regarding what is your take on the digital turn of the film ecology? Whether you prefer it from the grains to pixels ecosystem, but what the sound pixeling or the sound binary, zeros and ones, how it is incorporated there?
okay. First of all, regarding Hiraji, I have not meant anything offensive. If a filmmaker, despite her track record of mixing 150 films, if a filmmaker feels insecure that a female mixing engineer is not able to deal with hardcore action scene, first of all, it is their immaturity to say something like that, because she's not going to wrestle with anybody. And secondly, again I said, women have a much larger capability than men. They are very organized, they can deal with a lot of finer things. especially when you deal with far more number of tracks, like in today's mix stage, they are far more organized to do that than male. This is what I believe. So I never meant to, ride over a female ability to understand. I think if at all anybody made her feel that way, I think it is pure male chauvinism, nothing else. So I don't attribute to that kind of a thinking, that kind of a behavior, and I rate them and I feel them equal to me. I think we had some of the best female filmmakers in this country, so there's no doubt about their ability to tell stories, and some of the best camera persons in this country are females. So just forget about it. I have had the good fortune to have many girl assistants, and they are all some of the celebrated sound people in the Bombay Indian film industry today. So I don't doubt at all. I believe them completely and I trust them completely, more than my male assistants. That's one. Secondly, what was your question?
He wanted to
A
know that
modification of from
The
the
disappearance of silent movies, film as an art is that.
Yeah. So that's always when the talkies came into being. That is one of the main argument of people from Hollywood. Now you have to understand, Hollywood is not everything. Okay, Hollywood is not the end of the story. Book on Indian sound aesthetics. Right now, like in this last year, there is a PhD done in English University on aesthetics of Indian sound. There's a dissertation is going to be published as a book by a FTA graduate who's been doing his doctorate and MFA and doctorate in one of the England universities. So I hope that is going to get sort of a lot of discourse, dialogue with sound people, practitioners and otherwise. I have gone through the decision, so I know it very well. So that's been discussed, historical aspects and other aspects. So, so this argument has always been there. Even today it is there. There are a lot of jokes being cracked about sound guys in the industry, even in the Hollywood. I mean, see, the sound situation of the sound mixers in India and situation of sound mixers in Hollywood is almost parallel. Everybody, we are all struggling for a voice, a space. We are all struggling with the same equations and same problems. So this particular aspect has come from the people from silent era. When talkie came into being, they needed to know singing. They need to have good voice to be an artist. So if you look at the film like Artist, for example, it sort of spans across those history. And sound was always cumbersome. The directors couldn't give cue to the actors, which was like a open-end kind of an area. So they couldn't give cue. Cameramen couldn't get cue for moving their cameras around, and they needed to not only come into the lighting points, they also needed to come into the boom points. So actors felt restricted. Cameraman, who is the big boss of a set. In olden times, cameraman was the first person to get makeup done because they needed to sit in the high intensity light. So that was the importance of cameraman in a film set. So he felt, constricted. Directors felt constricted. So sound was a problem. It has always been a problem for a film set. We were the last needed guys in a film set. So they always thought the art of filmmaking was limited with the invention of sound. But to the other facts is that if you just look at the Hollywood history of the late 20s, the reason of, they say in one of the historical markings, they say that America tide over the Great Depression only because of the sound came into being. From a 50 million overall box office, it went into 120 million box office. Similar thing happened when Dolby invented Dolby A processing. We went to like a mono optical to a five track stereo exposition. So we are always we are looked at as unwanted people in a set, you know. When there's a joke that float around in Hollywood, they always say "fuck the sound guy," you know. So that's the term. Sorry for my language, I didn't mean it in that way. So it is not an advantage. Like I said, if you look at it from an artistic point of view, it's not a limitation. It's one of the biggest artistic power you have, and it is up to you how you exercise it. You know, you can shout around on a set and become a nuisance, or you can be part of a beautiful filmmaking process. If I am shooting on a set, I never sit idle. I am just always on my toes. I'm just looking around and see how other people are working, what I can do. I can put one more microphone and get things done. Understand, be with actors, understand them. You know, there is a psychology that they go through, which, see, we are a very powerful people. I mean, powerful people, we are, in a way, we are people outside the frame. We have nothing to get exposed. If a film fail, what is there to expose? What is there for you? You're a technician, didn't work. But for an actor, it's not that. That's not the situation. For an author, that's not the situation. So they have something more to lose. So how much you want to be involved in a process determines who you are and how you are and what you are. So I have always been a part of it, and I never felt being unwanted, or I never made to feel that you are like a. You know, my people who worked with me always felt empowered with me. You know. This great director, the guy who directed Shakespeare in Love, John Madden, he told me that Resul, you become so, we can't do without you once you start working together. You know, and if that is the kind of thing that you are able to contribute in the making of a film, that's great to be in that position. So, coming to your third question.
24 frames per second.
Yeah, and if you read history of sound in cinema, you will come to know that standardization of speed, standardization of footages, standardization of lighting, all because of sound. Because sound needed very 20 ASA, if you understand what it is. In today's time, we shot sound. Sound is not recorded. It was shot on camera, sound camera. We were exposing sound. So the whole standardization of film as a cellular, as a medium, came in because of sound. So there are many things. If you read up, there's a lot of material on the internet you can read and find out. And what was the third question?
That's all right.
No, there's one more question that you asked me about binary numbers. What was it?
Sir, recently scientists
No. You don't ask another question. Please let him answer the first.
Grain to pixel.
A grain to pixel. So it refers to one of the sound artwork that I have done, where I've been asked this question. When you had point camera, remember, anybody know what is pin camera? Pinhole camera, sorry, pinhole camera. So what is the sound related to pinhole camera? If there is a sound. That is a still camera, that was frozen image. When do a frozen image become a moving image? Where is it? Where is the thing? Where is the line? Where is it? Where does it? A frozen image, a still image, a still camera, becomes a moving image. When? Where? Have you ever thought about it? Imagine. I'll ask the question, I will answer it. So you're not troubled. Okay? So you'll be a good audience. I worked on a sound art visual installation wherein we have taken some 300 images from Bombay Riot. You know, the cameraman from a newspaper agency shot many footages of images which never got published. So we shot that and we took it and we started capturing those images. Now imagine, there are two kinds of things here. One is a frozen time inside the images that news cameraman was shot. Now right now, I am shooting that with the movie camera. I am shooting stills, stop blocks, tuck, 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 tuck. As long as there are stop blocks, they are still images that are capturing a frozen time. At some point of time, from one frozen image to another frozen image, we start a moving camera. So the frozen image began a moving image the moment we start a moving camera, which meant it has a different sense of time now. How do you do sound for that? Still images of the riot had a frozen time in it. Period, image, day, whatever that is, time in it. I am capturing that with a movie camera. I am dealing with two kinds of time right now. The frozen time inside the frame and the time that I am right now dealing with the moving image, which is the time of now. Now, I thought this is a bit tricky because every sense of time that every audience that is going to watch this is going to be different. Because you look at that image, an image which has frozen time. You are sitting in a room and watching it, and you are listening to sounds that are coming in that room, which you are relating to the image that you see. Every of your expression of time, the temporal element of that image, series of image, is related to the time that you are watching that image. And there is a synthesis of the time that you are in right now and the frozen time inside. I tell you very simplistically later on another film that when I deal with it. So I decided to record people watching this moving image in a room, and I multiplicated it with many rooms, not just one room, many rooms. So I had a huge collection of recordings, like 15 minutes of recordings of one person watching, two person watching, three person watching, and I'm recording those watching process, and I recorded those times. Then I took it to Foley room, and I made my Foley artist to sit and watch it, and I recorded them watching it. And of course, when they watch it, they see something, and I asked them to be free, and they started working on sound. I captured that multiple times. Then I took everything into my editing room, and I started editing sound. There is sound that I heard, like door banging that I heard when I looked at that image of the riot. It sounded to me like a train passing by. Now you have to imagine, what you hear is not what you associate. A fridge door can be like a car door sound. Sugar that falls on a bond paper can be rain. It's all about not the best sound you record. It's all about, is that the most convincing sound for that particular image? That there cannot be any other sound but this, you know. So I created the synthesis that became the soundtrack of it. So the same exercise we also shot with pinhole camera. And this guy asked me, what is the sound corresponds to pinhole camera? And I said, it's pixels. Pixels of sound. Now what is pixels of sound? We are, imagine, sitting in a quiet place. Quiet place. You don't hear anything because it is quiet. But if you keep a microphone there, microphone will hear. There is, Bobby referred to as something called a room tone. There is air around us, always. And that air is constantly moving. And it is creating sounds that would make you behave in a particular way. Otherwise, why would you feel like singing in a bathroom? We all felt that an element of Yeshidas in all of us because when we are in the bathroom. That is the psychoacoustics of rooms, you know. We feel quiet in a seashore or in a valley because the nature of sounds we hear there. So I decided to record, keeping a microphone on and amplifying that microphone through a speaker. And I started creating loops, Then I started removing things from that piece of recording. And where I left with, only sounds of dots. What is, it's like saying, when a dancer become a dancer, when he or she forgets the skill of dancing, what is left with is something that defines them. For me, that is the biggest thought of Indian, aesthetics, be it music, any other art, India when we talk about. Otherwise, there are classical musicians sitting here. Every performance of the same raga of a musician is different, because he is trying to find himself in every other expositions. So I do not think it is binary numbers. Actually, digital is quite a falsifying thing for me. As a technology can record 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz as per the human range of listening. Early times of digital, when it is perceived, we felt that is very clinical, because we were not used to listening to that. We were used to listening to analog, which has, because the people who studied physics would understand, there's something called hysteresis curve in magnetism, because of the hysteresis of the medium, it had shaped, a certain warmth that you get in analog, which was missing in digital. So what we do in digital is to recreate, how we used to hear. Now when I say this used to hear is a very, very contentious term, because our human ear response is quite comparative to the hysteresis curve that you see in magnetism. I mean, same thing goes about, the expo curve of, if there are camera students, they would know. When you expose in a film, the expo curve also goes in the same way as the hysteresis curve. So there is a, as the technology advances, we realize that there's a direct correlation the way human eye and human ear, how we see and how we hear things, which to a certain extent, certain technology was more close to us, so we felt them as more closer to life, and something that technically are able to reproduce exactly what what the medium is able to do. We found it as clinical. When you fast forward a CD, you hear blocks of sound, but when you're playing it, you don't hear the boxes of sound. Why? Because if you look at binary numbers, it is recorded as binary numbers, zeros and ones. Doesn't have either no voltage or yes voltage. There's nothing else. It's all organizational numbers. That's how Vedas were. We are a 10,000-year-old tradition, which is, we are the only civilization in the world who has organized knowledge as in the form of sound, as is easy to remember. The words were organized in a way musically, so that it is easy to remember, so that we understood it, we mucked it up, and we passed on to generation as oral tradition. Comes to binary numbers, when they have blocks of sound, but when we hear it, it doesn't come to you as box of sound. Why? Persistence of sound, like persistence of vision. So there's a lot of similarity when you study. So That's why I'm saying you cannot isolate one faculty from the other. I think it's a, it's a synergy of both.
Can I ask you? Yeah. I mean, just a remark first to Hari and then a lot of reference in Rasul's, remarks. I mean, of course, it's easy to say sound is or aesthetic, sound aesthetic or auditory aesthetic is subjective. But then I think we refer more to aesthetic sensibility. But in philosophy, aesthetics is the least subjective discipline. Actually, it is objective. And of course, in comparison with the visual aesthetics, and in ordinary life, like, we have more control over our perspectives and what we want to see or we don't want to see. But with sound, we have to accept. So it is more given than we decide what. But then in film it is different because it's an art. But then to think about an auditory aesthetics, which is as important as a visual aesthetics, which is very well known, even as an academic discipline. But in film, I think this has a great relevance because, I just think of someone who was a great master of sound, which is Andrei Tarkovsky. He was not just a master of visual, but a great master of sound. And why he deliberately deployed that great objectivity of sound, if I may say, is also a part of his polemic against Eisenstein's montage theory. That the extremely subject-centered mise-en-scène, and it has to be reversed, that givenness of life of the object as represented in the sound, visuals, etc., etc. And no wonder that he used sound for this in his film sequence. And another reason, he was a product of a music school. He did music first and then film. I think this auditory aesthetics has a great, I would say, philosophical value, especially, particularly in the film aesthetics.
I think you should be on this side.
First of all, let me clarify some of the points which I made. Actually, I didn't make much points, only 2 points I made. I wanted to be very simplicity. And regarding this very first I said about the subjectivity of the aesthetics. I said it on purpose because I never said it is something wrong with talking about aesthetics, as some response came as feedback. I understand. I never said it's something wrong. I said I am not comfortable discussing subjectivity, and aesthetics is more into subjectivity. The reason being, some things are very personal, and I am on the other side of the creation. That the thing is that, if you think about art and aesthetics, the very first form, the art form which people recognized as art form is, I think most of you will agree, it's poetry. That's the very first written literary work, poetry. Actually, even before written things were there, through the oral tradition, actually there was, when the language developed as a means of communication and aesthetics, that script was not there, how to write it down in a codified form. So it was completely oral tradition. That's why we say the poetry was the very first art form, because novel and all need to be written down. Poetry can be recited orally and understood, communicated, enjoyed. So that way, even the great poets have opined that this poetry, you can never explained or it's not the cup of tea in the point of view of poet. Even the great poets have opined that in Sanskrit there is a saying, Kavita rasa chaduryam vyakhyata veti na kavi, means the poet who writes the poem never enjoys the beauty of the poem. It's an impulse coming to him, and he is making that poem. I'm not using the word writing because even before writing, the language developed, scripts developed, there was oral art forms like poetry. So it is a vyakhyata, it's an audience who enjoy the beauty of the poem. And as an example, he gives, I think it's Kalidasa or Bhartrihari who said this, Kavida Rasa Chaduryam Vyakhyata Aveti Na Kavi. And as an example, he says, Sudha Surata Samarthyam Jamada Veti Na Pita. Means, I don't know whether should I explain this in this kind of an audience, because Sudha Surata Samarthyam, the sexual skills of a daughter is enjoyed by the person who marries her, not the father. You know, just like that, Kavita is enjoyed by the audience, who hear. And once the poet writes it down, it's beyond him. People all can have their own interpretations and their own enjoyment. So in that sense, I said I'm not comfortable. It's a very personal experience of this subjective thing called aesthetics. He said there's nothing wrong. Did I ever say it's wrong? No, I am not comfortable. Some people kiss in front of it's like kiss of love. Some activism was there, like kiss of love. People come in front of the large audience and kiss. And I didn't take part in that because I am not comfortable. It's a very personal experience for me, expressing love and affection. But that doesn't mean that I object to these people who do that. Okay, so I hope you understood. And what was the next thing?
No, I just asked about this auditory aesthetics and the possibility that in the film aesthetics. I mean,
Again, okay, good you raised that point. For me, I never consider sound alone. For me, a lot of people say that, okay, there are 3 parts in sound, like dialogue, effects, and ambience, and all that. I never consider these demarcations. For me, if I say it very frankly, the dialogue is the least important for me because it's coming out of your human mouth. And it's a waste. Whatever coming out of your body is a waste actually. Do we take something out of your body which is useful for you? You take food inside and convert into energy forms, and different things are taken as blood, and there are 7 elements, and it is taken as your energy forms, and you throw out whatever you don't need as waste, like feces and urine and so sweat and all these things which you don't need is coming out of your food, isn't it? So that way even the voice, we are throwing it out. It's a waste. But fortunately there are a lot of information in all this waste. Even the stool has got a lot of information. When you go to a doctor, they say that, okay, you examine your stool and urine and all that, we'll tell you what is your problem inside. The same way you can get information from the sound also. There are people who could say what is your problem inside. Your liver is functioning properly, or your heart is functioning properly, your kidney, your whatever organs you are having inside is functioning properly just by listening to the sound coming out of your mouth. Okay, so that way I don't give any more importance to dialogue in cinema. For me, all these oral elements present over there is a single thing. I never differentiate between dialogue and effects. I never dampen the footsteps even. If there is it's a dialogue sequence walking, and I never damp the footsteps and add it later. Because for me, it's having a very integral relationship with the not only among the sound elements, but with the visual also. If you are shooting, maybe you are not seeing the footsteps. The person may be wearing a chappal or simple chappal or shoes or wearing fancy canvas or whatever it may be. So that gives a kind of comfort to him. So that is reflected in his voice. And that is reflected in his visual look, the kind of nerves which is working on your facial things. All will get reflected and recorded on the camera. So if you replace that and take only the voice part of it, the voice don't have any truthful representation to the whole the body as a whole, and then the visual which is being recorded on the camera. So I treat it as equally important, all the elements. You may not see the effects which is being heard over there because that's the limitation of the visual. You have to see only within the frame. Outside the frame, we are not seeing anything. So sound is everywhere, it's omnipresent. So we should have this line of sight transmission kind of property, which sound has only when it is in the high pitch. But generally speaking, sound don't have that omnidirectional property. You can travel from all around. So it's possibility of sound, not the shortcoming of sound.
Otherwise, the workflow from the pre-mix to the mastering stage.
Yeah, we start the work for the mixing from your dialogue sessions to effects. So the whole thing is an open session.
Okay, so you follow by certain elements like from dialogues to ambience to SFX during the mixing stage.
How you go with it, you are asking.
Yeah.
So it's just the dialogue. Always it's a dialogue. You need to understand the film. So being a sound mixer or a sound designer, just watch the film once. Maybe you sit with the director or you watch it when the film is given to you, and then you start working on the dialogue first. That is the first base. Then keeping that dialogue as a session, with that you work with the effects, and then after that, because usually it is every mixing, like the music comes later stage only. So once you are tuned up with the dialogue and the effects, and after you get the music and your songs, you just get into the session and finish your mix onto that. And now with the technology and what thing we have is we have an open session. Earlier it used to be when DTS started, we used to do the dialogue, then take a bounce of it 5.1, effects 5.1, ambience 5.1, music 5.1, and everything will be 5.1. So any dialogue, like there are 3 characters in a mix scene talking, and the director wants this dialogue to go down, I want this dialogue, this is to be muted, you have to go back to the premix again. Go there, mute that, record that, bring it back. But now that is not there. You just keep the whole session open so that every track is there and you can just then and there do it. Even the music also be taken to the session. That is the one thing. And the second thing?
Do you prefer the sound designer to be with you?
Yeah.
During the
Second thing is sound designer. Sound designer, like earlier also I said about the mono mixing and 5.1 when you were doing. That time also there were sound designers and the effects guys who were used to do the effects. So now the sound designers is more prominent, which is really good, which is like you want when you are a sound mixer and
During mixing.
you want. Yeah, there is a conflict set. Personally, I have no problem. Earlier also there used to be these sound people who used to do their sound effects and just give us the thing. And when you are mixing, I think equally as the sound designer says, even the sound mixer is responsible for the mix to decide whether you want this to sound this way, you want to close the music, or how you want that scene to be done. It is not the sound mixer that whatever is given to you, you are just trying to mix everything and give. That is not what I am doing. So I look at it when I finish a 20 minutes reel. Once the music is given by a music director also, I finish the whole reel, I watch it 2-3 times, and then I myself decide where the music works or not and try to mute the music, then listen to it, music, the effects, and where it can go away, where you can really reverb it, all those things I do it as a sound mixer. And then when I show it to the director, I show it to him what I have done first those 20 minutes, the reel runs. And then after showing it to him, if he says okay and if he has any corrections, do it. Then I make it a point to tell him that there was a music here, I muted it. Because it should not be the thing that he would have definitely sat with the music composer when the music background score was done. But and he would have been really so much tied up with the films that release time that he would have forgotten also that he had some music there. But when they watch the first copy with the music composer should not be surprised to see that my music is muted, and the director should not say that I didn't know that you had put music there. So I make sure that when the reel is done and I show the reel to him, after he's seen, he's okay with it, he's fine with it, I tell him that there was a music here, this bit, but I have muted, do you want to see it with the music? So sometimes the director will say, yeah, just play it. So I find it that 80% of it, the director will say, yeah, it's good that you're muted it. But sometimes, okay, no, you need the music for the audience to go up. He comes with, because he's the captain of the ship at the end of it. So as a sound mixer also, we take a call on that. It is not that. But having a sound designer next to you who has really worked on the sound side, the effect side of it, or the dialogue side of it, it's like a policing a mix again, who's sitting with you and giving you one more ear to tell that no, this can be done that way or that, and he will be there before the director to judge. So it is really good to have a sound designer also.
You had a third question for Resul?
I just want to begin answering your question with a rejoinder. If we had looked at everything that comes out of human body is a waste, then we wouldn't have had great performers, great singers, great authors in this world to exist and imbibe from. Have you ever thought why, when you hear an old song sung by Mohammad Rafi or Ladaji or Yesudas, we feel nostalgic? Why, with all the technology today, we still feel that old song, no? That one song is so close to you, so much of memory that it evokes in you. Have you ever thought why? Let me explain a scenario of 5 people in a room. A singer, a musician, a tablaist, a conductor, a music director in a room. They are performing. Imagine they are setting up a song on a poetry that someone has written for a situation. In olden times, when they had only one microphone, they practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. They had one chance to record what they practiced, where the singer, the musician, the conductor, the composer, and the sound guy who needed to increase the level when the vocal is being performed, or he need to decrease the level when the tabla is being performed. And he also needed to manifest how electronically what we heard when the performance is being recorded. They all had one chance for 5 minutes, and they put the best of them out into that room. There were not 5 people at that moment. It was a moment where all 5 of them became one. It is that oneness that we experience when we listen to that old song about which we feel nostalgic today. It is that oneness. That oneness has transcended time and space. That's why. Not because of it was technically deficient, or today we do far more technically advanced recordings. Still we feel it. No, it's not touching you. So anything that comes out of human body is not, for me, a waste. It is something that I look at it as important as anything else in my life. So, coming back to you, how technology that I used in 2.0. So 2.0, when we discussed the basic script itself, Shankar asked me, "Sir, we have a 3-dimensional picture. 3-dimensional picture means something that comes out of the 2-dimensional exposition of image that we have in a cinema hall. The picture comes out of the screen and come into the audience. So what is sound? What is 3-dimensional sound? Is there anything like that in sound?" He asked me. And there were sequences in the film where there were things moving from the floor to the screen, to the wall above, to the left wall, to the right wall, and there were things moving all around. It was part of the story. It was part of what he has written. And he asked me, when he narrated the story to me, he asked me if can we achieve this. Then I realized that floor, when you're in a cinema hall, when you see a two-dimensional picture, you see sound all, there's a possibility of using sound all around you. So when you say, even in a monofilm, when you record a monofilm, I would say when the picture comes from a two-dimensional, horizontal plane, to me the sound is spherical in nature because it allows you to go inside the picture. You see? So in today's technology, where for me the experience of sound is immersive in nature, even with just one mono source. When I say monofilm, one mono source in the center of the screen. So today, with the advent of technology in Dolby Atmos or InSound or 3D, what we are doing is we are giving geographical meaning, positions to this immersive experience of sound that you otherwise experience. Now we have a physical form and shape, and that physical form is restricted to a cinema hall's size and shape, where floor was never been part of your storytelling. So when Shankar asked me this question, can things move from the screen into the audience, I thought, why not use the floor as a part of my storytelling? Now Atmos allows me to use overheads, a plane above me, like in an open space. There's a sky, the space above me is also part of my storytelling. So why can't I use the floor as a part of my storytelling? So there arises this idea of creating the new format called SRL40, where I have used floor as a part of the storytelling. Now that film required that kind of a sound exposition. But if tomorrow some film comes up and says that we want to use the same thing and I want to use this, I can perfect. But it took me 2 years to sort of perfect that whole entire format, because I needed to work with an existing commercial format. One reason is that I cannot have a separate format for just one film. The exhibition system would reject me, and I cannot give them like a too expensive makeover. Then they would reject me, and there would be one show of 2.0, and then immediately after there would be another show of another film. So they should be able to switch between formats. So myself and Dwarak Warrior, if he were here today, he would have explained it in detail. Myself and Dwarak Warrior, and of course Pro Tools consultants, and we discussed over like when Shankar asked me, is it possible? I said it's possible. Theoretically, it is possible. Practically, how is it possible? We need to find out. You have to give me time. So it took us, like some of the updates in Pro Tools Ultimate of where you're able to move sound, the new panel is actually, the thought behind that panel actually came up with this film, and things that I needed for to do in this film. I have given them feedback to Avid, and Avid started developing things for me, and that what has happened. So it is a huge combined effort of Avid, and of course Dolby allowed me to use their architecture for me to put in this new format, and I have plugged out 2 channels from unused Dolby Atmosphere architecture and created this whole cluster of speakers that goes behind every other seats. And I did a lot of tests. It took me almost 40 days working in a theater, in Satyam Theatre in Chennai, installing, pulling out, installing, pulling out, reinstalling, testing, and I come across a cluster of sound that would work, would sweep, So the challenges were enormous, because I had to create the same atmosphere in the mix room. So Rahman had to entirely cancel everything, and I had to redo Rahman's studio and refurbish this whole thing and put this new format in the mix room. then we do the mix and we master and we go and to test like a 1 minute footage. I have to mix it that way and master it and make a DCP and go to the film theater, check it, figure out, okay, these speakers systems are not working, and it comes from the seat where audience have immediate access and they would start pulling out things, and and I also didn't want them to see that there's a speaker sitting there, so I needed to camouflage it. And so every room, we sort of did some 8 rooms, so I needed to work with the interior design of the room to camouflage the speakers, and so that lot of work has gone into it. And if any other producer comes with a good story like that, where I can use that technology for the fullest use. Now I know the limitation of the technology, and I am all game for it. Thank you. Where did I even get? Where is he come from? Now we are dealing with situation like this. Telling someone like A.R. Rahman, I mean, hello, where are you standing? So we are in a situation where what I try to do is to find an oral texture to the whole film, wherein, when the song comes, it comes like beautiful, and when the song goes out, when the next dialogue sequence comes, it shouldn't sound like an FD documentary. It should all sound like within the whole oral spectrum. So we try to, control, manifest, rework, redo, and make sure that everything falls in place. For example, when I worked with the film like 3, Kolaveri song was so popular that it has become a burden on me. Like, how do you deal with it? Because it was like a internet fascination, one of the top gross, charting song in the country and in the world. The first time producers felt that, if it's become an internet hit, you can make money. And Sony Music made more money than they spent in the entire film with one song, because the hits it got. So it became a problem. So I had to forget the fact that Kolaveri was so and so. I have to find that song within the film. So I have to design things around before and after the song so that this become a part of it. So everything that in a musical, everything has to be part of one sonic spectrum, which is the film. So that's what we do. And we struggle a lot, because in today's time, we get trash, literally trash. Like, one of the biggest downfall of digital technology is that there are no standards. You can get a recording system for 50 rupees, and you can get the same thing for 50 lakhs. And you can't compare the two. And literally, I'm talking about singers. Some of the biggest singers in the country have sung in hotel rooms, and we have to deal with it. They don't understand when the song is heard in a 2-track studio. They don't understand the problems. When we make it into a 5-1 or an Atmos, we realize every problem of a singer. We start hearing it, and they don't want us to do anything about it, because everything comes out, and to a great extent, that like, for example, there's a film that is running now in theaters called Takul. If you get a chance, please go and watch it, because it is a peculiar film that is the story is being told in a Christian atmosphere, where we have not seen that in Malayalam cinema a lot. And if I take some example, some Spanish film or something like that, we have seen it. So I wanted to identify what is the sound of Christianity. I wanted them to explore it. I mean, there's a huge criticism about me, and there are music directors who are not willing to work with me because they feel that I kill their music. I mean, come on, if you give me trash, I'll throw it. And I have that guts to do that. Some people don't have the guts to do it, and I'm not looking at your stuff. I'm looking at if it works for the film or not works for the film. So when we're working on the music, we worked a lot to find out what. And beyond a point, the music director said, "Sorry, sir, I can't do beyond anything this. This is beyond me." Then I started extracting sound from the existing things. And I also started, did a lot of research and find out Gothic sounds, and I, took it from them and put it together and created a world
You know, to all my detractors who say that I don't use music, go and watch Tako, it is full of music. You know, but I try to extract things like that. So what we try to do, especially when we have to deal with a lot of music in a film, we try and give one sonic spectrum, which is the film. You know, I mean, you see that when you see what was the last musical that came from Hollywood, Ryan Gosling and La La Land. You know, we don't have we haven't perfected like that, but because it's been our staple diet. Yeah.
One question you
three questions I have. The first question is importance of silence in cinema. The second is what is your inspiration behind choosing this particular profession, and which work you consider as your best piece of work. And the third is like if not a sound designer, then what would Resul Pookutty have been?
Would have been. Okay. First, silence. Importance of silence. Is silence important? In a noisy world, is it important? There's noise of all kinds. There's noise of art. There's noise of, you know. Do you experience silence in life? Do you ever experience silence in life? Silence for me is not a sound. Okay? Imagine you're walking down the street, you're going somewhere, you're in a hurry, you get a phone call, and the phone call says your mother passed away. Everything stops for you. For a moment, everything stops for you, and there's a vacuum. If you experience that vacuum, probably you have gone through an experience of silence emotionally. Is silence important? Yes. Because in every film, what I try to do is to arrive at the silence. What I try to do to take my audience through an emotional experience where they experience that moment of silence. So it's not a sound for me. It is a very powerful emotional experience. You know? And of course it is, as you say, it is very, very important. Of course it is important. Why? Because you've heard a pin drop silence. Have you ever heard a pin dropping in real life? Sound of a pin drop in real life? Well, I can make you hear that in a film. Probably not in real life. You know why? In the beginning of my conversation, I said there's a rhythm that I set forth between your heartbeat and your breath, and with the screen, things going on the screen. Within that system of synthesis, I can make you hear the pin drops. Because I manifest everything. But those manifestations come from my experiences in real life and my emotional experiences. I hope I answered you. Second was, what was the question?
Inspiration behind this particular profession, and
particular profession.
Yeah, and what is your best piece of work which you consider?
The best piece of work, I have no clue, because every work that I see, after some time, I want to go and change it. And it's very difficult for someone, if you have 3 children and say choose your best child, it is very difficult to say. And certain, children have given you joy, so you remember them, and so you remember those work. And inspiration. Actually, I never wanted to be a sound guy. I wanted to be a physicist, and I wanted to research in superconductivity. And I thought I will invent the superconductive element and win a Nobel Prize for India. That was my ambition. Man proposes, God disposes. Okay? And I couldn't pursue my master's in physics, so I went to study law. Then I thought the minimum I will become will be the Chief Justice of India. Again, man proposes, God disposes. When I was studying in Trivandrum, a couple of my college buddies told me that there's a course in the Film Institute called sound recording and sound engineering, BSc Physics is the basic qualification. So if I wrote all of the entrance, I went there thinking that it is an extension of my physics studies. I went there and I discovered cinema. And I failed in my first attempt. I came back, found cinema, and I became a film person. From an art science student, I become an art student. Like she said, she come from analog, imbibed digital. Like her, I was also an analog student, become a digital practitioner, imbibed both. Quite like you guys, because you are all born in the digital era. And we are digital immigrants. We look at it from outside because it came to us. You are born within it, you know. So you are much faster in dealing with phones, and you know, in our time we had to tell our mother, you know, you have to give money for tables, you know, injury it is called at those times. You know what? You know the real name of injury in Malayalam. Injury. Anybody from Malayalam medium? Vishruda Manapadam. Vishruda Manapadam. So we have taken money from our mother for, you know, now you guys take it for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and other things. So, it works the same way, but in a different medium. So, actually, I have to run.